everyone. We've just opened the webinar. I was just remarking before we did open the webinar how it can feel a little bit weird because I can't see any of you, I can't hear any of you, I just see a list of names coming in. It feels a bit like being in a university lecture, but you can't see your students at all. It could just be a list of names that people have signed up with. So welcome. I hope everyone is okay after yesterday, and if you had the day off, that you spent it well. We'll just leave it for another minute or so, letting people kind of come in before we start. But yeah, I always feel like this is the moment for on hold music or something. I don't know, it just feels super awkward. Maybe they would invent like webinar intro films or something. Like, yeah, maybe we should think of that. I don't know. Kieran, you can maybe help make one with all your media knowledge. But thank you so much for coming along. And as I said, I hope you all had a restful day if you were off yesterday. So in terms of a webinar format, I'd just like to welcome you all. If you haven't been on a webinar before, it can feel a little bit strange because it's not like a Zoom call or a Teams call that you're maybe used to. There are various functions on the Zoom call that you can use if you are an attendee to the event to ask a question of the panel audience that you can see here today. That includes Tracy, Sylvia, Lee, Kieran and Leanne, who will introduce themselves through the course of the webinar. But if you want to ask a question of anybody of the webinar panel, there is a Q&A function, or should be a Q&A function on the bottom of the toolbar. Next to that on the left, there should be a raise hand function. So I would encourage people, if you've got like a general question that doesn't feel super urgent and can wait to a Q&A at the end, use the Q&A button, type in your question there. If it's like a super urgent and I must ask this question, if you want to kind of like raise your hand, what will allow one of us to do who are the hosts and the co-hosts of the webinar is to allow you to kind of ask the question with your voice audibly. So if you're kind of brave enough to do that, that's all good. If not, feel free to just put them in the Q&A function. There should be no chat function on. So anything, if you could direct to the Q&A function, that would be great. What else can we do? Yeah, just to let you know, when you came in, it should have alerted to you that the webinar is being recorded with a lady letting you know that. As I said, that's not really a big deal. If you are an attendee, nobody can see you and nobody can hear you. But obviously, if you do raise your hand to ask a question, you will be then on the recording. So just bear that in mind. Somebody has raised a hand. Somebody has put their hand down. Okay, well, we will continue. That always happens.
I think that might have been somebody just practicing. That's okay. I'll keep an eye on it.
Yeah, thanks, Tracy. So how today is going to be running? Well, today's webinar is all about planning. So we've got some really, really brilliant speakers lined up to you today. We have Kieran, who is a young person who's very, very passionate about planning and all of that entails. We've got Sylvia and Leanne from Thistle, who will be talking about lived experience of planning and what they do with planning as Thistle, and then probably a lot about the big plan, I'd imagine, because that is just great and I can't wait to hear about it. And then finally Lee from ILF Scotland, who's here to talk about what ILF do around the person-centred planning and how you can access grant monies and other bits and pieces around that. And then we will go into, as I said, like a kind of Q&A panel at the end where we'll answer any of your questions. So the webinar is roughly, I think, for an hour and a half today, I think. So we'll try and leave as much time for questions and stuff at the end. So that's kind of me with everything. I don't think I've missed anything off, Tracy. If there's anything I have, just send me a wee message and I'll just kind of add it in. But as I said, if other people who aren't speaking could turn off their kind of cameras and be muted. Kieran, it's going to be me and you kind of introducing the session. Are you feeling up for it?
Yeah.
Cool. So Kieran, before we kind of go into the Q&A bit and ask you a few questions about your planning experience, do you want to tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, and all the rest of it?
Oh, I am. Okay, here's the details.
Yeah, as many details as you like.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm Kieran. I'm part of the DIs, short for Divergent Influencer. Oh, I said it right this time. Usually I say it wrong. And me and Scott came to work together to deliver this presentation. I recently been at high school. When I mean recently, I mean like 4 years ago. When I was like 18, I'm 22. Yeah.
Yeah, and you've just left college as well, haven't you, Kieran? You're now in the market for employment.
Yeah.
Yeah, how's that?
Sign me up.
Well, now's your opportunity. You've got an audience of 70 people. So if you're looking for a particular job, someone might know. So
Yeah.
retail.
Yeah, sure. Scott will put my email in the description.
I will do. If anyone needs Kieran's CV, just let me know. So
Wait, I don't have a CV.
well, maybe step one is getting on, Kieran. So you left school was it 4 years ago? You said to go into college.
Yeah, I left high school on the 28th of the 29th of June 2018.
Right. So yeah, 4 years ago.
Yeah.
So I know that you had some trouble at school, but we don't need to go into the details of that. But I know that you accessed planning at some point. Do
Yeah.
you want to tell us how you managed to get access to like planning to leave school when you were at school?
Yeah, that was through the big plan known at the time back then. It was known as Interact. Then it was like we did like drama, like what would be like after we left school and in similar situations like and then after that we did the big plan.
Right. So was it a project that came into your school?
Yeah, because my school was incompetent at doing it. So
Yeah. So they weren't confident, or did you mean to say
no,
something?
no, my school, no. My school was incompetent.
Right.
They had to get a child to do the job for them.
Right. So they asked someone in to come and provide the planning for you if that was good.
Yeah, because they couldn't do it themselves, so that's why.
Yeah. So they.
Yeah.
Why do you think they couldn't do it themselves, Kieran? Is it like did they not know, or
No.
didn't have the skills, or?
Not like they didn't have the skills. Like with the school, it's like how do I put this? It was like black and white. Like what your plan, what you gonna do when you leave school is like college or nothing. Like it was like interesting. Like something in a career you're interested in taking after school. It wasn't like that. It was like I don't know. It was like once you left, it was no any longer their problem anymore.
Yeah. So maybe was there like a lack of thinking outside the box? It sounds like a little bit.
Yeah, more on just a lack of thinking.
Okay.
Yeah.
With that in mind, what do you think good planning is, or what does it like feel like to experience for you?
What I think good planning is. Good plan to me would be like we'd be listening to the person. Like someone talks about like why they want to do something. It's like instead of interrupting and and listen with her and hear with a response, but it's been more about planning and like years ago, like being independent would be being independent traveling the bus would be like a dream. Now it's a reality.
Mhm. So in terms of like planning, it's like people actually kind of listening to hear rather than listening to respond. I know you've mentioned that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So before we get into the kind of like what did your plan lead to, like you've just mentioned independent travel, which is great. You have said to me before that the big plan changed your life, or it was life changing.
Yeah, it was life changing.
Yeah, and it was a safe space.
Yeah, it was a
Um,
safe space. Yeah.
do you want to tell us a little bit more about what that felt like for you and that experience of good planning?
With good planning, like we went what we can do. Like we did like labels the badges and we ignored the fact that okay, some of us in the room might have heavy labels, but it's like the badges that what we have, what skills we have that or more important roles we having a heavy label.
Right. So
like for example, we want to achieve something, even if for example it was something impossible, we'd be like, learn how would we plan around it. We'd be like through 6 sessions.
right. So people listen to what like your dreams were and what your
Yeah,
aspirations were, if that makes
yeah. It wasn't like a toxic positive environment. That was the great thing about it. It wasn't like a toxic positive environment. That school was more of that.
what I think I know what you mean by like toxic positivity, but like for people who are attending, do you want to explain what you mean a little bit by that?
What toxic positivity?
Yeah.
Toxic positivity is like being positive in a toxic way. Like if someone talks about an issue, you over you undermine their issue. For example, if I'm autistic, if I explain to someone, I have like lots of reality, explain it in a certain way. It'd be toxic positive that person to say, "Oh, we all have a bit of autism," because
Right.
because that toxic positive undermining my issue. So
Okay, so that idea of
yeah,
someone kind of like coming along and someone says like, "Oh, I feel a bit sad." Oh, that's okay. It's probably
we
gonna
all
be
get
a day
like
or something.
yeah, like if someone says I'm sad today, and or it would be toxic positive to say, "Oh, everyone gets sad,"
Right.
because you undermine why they were sad. Because like that's the or like or someone says they're struggling at something like a test, and it'd be horrible to say, "Oh, we all struggle at something," but you undermine what the person says they struggle at a test because
Yeah, you're kind of being positive about it rather than kind of like being real and listening to them. Is that what
yeah,
you?
yeah.
Yeah. So what other things like how other how other does how other how does good planning feel like? So there's the toxic positivity and the being real stuff. Are there any other things that you think are really important when it comes to planning for young people with additional support needs and
I,
others?
f- I think because like young people I hate to call it special education, but that's the only way to describe it. But like 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 when they in high school they have a low expectation because like the expectations lower on them. Like, oh, this person's not gonna be able to do this task, but with this on the big plan, it's different. It's like these expectations are out the window.
Mm-hmm.
Like, well, what a person's ability or not, like expecting, or they can do that or not. But it's more like how can we make that possible?
Yeah, so it's kind of like coming to people where they're at, I guess. And I guess
Yeah,
Sylvia and Leanne are here today and they can maybe pick up a little bit of that too. But it sounds like it was a really positive experience. And you
it
met,
was.
I'm good, I'm glad, because I don't think I would have met you actually if it hadn't been for your planning experience either. Like, I don't think you would have been involved with the
Yeah,
DIs group and stuff. You've mentioned that before too. So,
yeah,
um, in terms of then like the outcomes or the things that came out of the end of your planning, you mentioned that independent travel became a reality. What other
yeah.
things did the plan lead to you wanting to do and becoming a reality?
Don't worry, I didn't put down get a girlfriend. That became possible. That was so hard.
When it's happened, I suppose it's all good.
Yeah,
What other,
yeah,
so what other things is there like the kind of travel stuff?
yeah. I went to do a mainstream course, knowing it was difficult.
Mhm.
Yeah, but I got there in the end.
Yeah, do you want to tell us a
I,
bit more about that, Keith?
yeah, I did 2 years of digital media course. Unfortunately, I think I failed my digital media level 6. I failed that one.
But we all sometimes get setbacks and stuff. But
Yeah, but it made me think like I don't need to go to college anymore to do these things because I can like learn these things on my own. Like, it's not like I didn't. It's not like I didn't understand what the things like said. It was like the expectation of the script writer that I hate.
mhm.
Yeah,
So it was more like the kind of written work that like let you down, not like the learning
yeah.
that was hard.
Like all these essays are like. Uh, I came to realize I'm not built for essays, and that's not a bad thing because I know I'm good at when it comes to the math part. So yeah,
And you're like for people who haven't seen Kieran's artwork, it's absolutely amazing. Um,
yeah.
And I know myself and the other DIs and other people that have spoken to Kieran were encouraging them to create a whole set of cards during COVID.
Yeah.
Just because they're brilliant, they're amazing. Your art's really good.
I also helped to design the DI symbol.
You did. We're very
Yeah.
grateful for that too.
Yeah.
So just another couple of questions, Kieran, because me and you, I feel like we could sit and chat for ages about this, and we will do probably this afternoon. But why do you think that good planning isn't in place more in schools?
Well, why I don't think it's more in schools because it's because I think it goes back to the expectation, like expectation, like oh that person might not understand what it means, like these expectations, like I don't believe it, like because like someone has a disability, it's like because you have this, you're only limited to this, so you might not understand these things, but then you're just it goes back to you're making an assumption with that person, but yeah, it's not you're not having a conversation with that person, and I think that's what needs to be in schools. It wouldn't work in a school environment because the schools love to correct people in their spelling and writing. So I would take that if the teacher might hear saying, "Okay, and you spelled that word wrong. I know it's wrong, but I know what I'm saying. So stop correcting. I hate it."
So yeah, from that, it like the environment needs to be one that isn't like about correcting people and how they are. It needs
Yeah,
to accept people where they're at and kind of work from there.
yeah,
And you've already mentioned that it needs to be like aspirational and
yeah.
can focus on what people can do and not what they can't do.
Like if they see someone with a disability doing something what they may think is impossible, I think, oh, they might be attracted to that idea and think, okay, he's able to do this. Why am I not able to do it? They understand. Yeah.
Yeah, so having somebody there that's like a role model as well, because I know like
I wouldn't say role model. I like to say inspiration.
an inspiration. Do you have any inspirations particularly in mind that were
Yeah. I
that?
say Alexander was like an inspiration.
How
Yeah, like he cancelled his taxi, and I wish I had the power to do that.
Yeah, it's brave choice for Alexander. But
Yeah,
that's nice that somebody
yeah.
who'd gone through that was inspiring you too.
I wouldn't say I'm a role model because I don't like the idea because role model because in school because my teacher made it impossible. Oh, we're all gonna be a well role model. Like I like folks saying, "Oh, what can role models no get? Can role models no get sick of being good with role models all the time?" Because
Yeah, I guess it's a high expectation, but an inspiration is a good, I think, a good,
yeah, I like the inspiration idea, but not the role model part.
yeah, too much pressure.
Maybe they want you just that's going to be role models because the teacher wasn't so good at the job either. So.
So, what else
Yeah,
have you mentioned in planning here? I know that you've mentioned about imagination and your
yeah,
dream and stuff. Um, and you've also kind of mentioned a little bit about like how planning allows people to see past the expectations that they put on you.
yeah.
Is there anything else you kind of want to add about
I
that?
think like the expect like for example like when it goes back to the expectation. I remember I remember there was like a hard math. I remember that day when I got my math teacher's respect. It's not like he didn't respect me, but I remember the day when I did this, this math test. He thought no one could. He thought because there were people who did it before me and failed. Don't don't get me wrong. There were people who were smarter than me couldn't do it. And it was called Daddy's Fire Unit, and I got like 67% of it right. So like because of these expectations, like oh, and I actually got his respect. I remember how shocked he was. Like he got my respect. I got his respect. That's what I liked of it.
Yeah, so maybe there's something in the planning process as well that isn't just being delivered to the young person and the family. Maybe there's something about how allowing people to explore their dreams and aspirations kind of allows people to understand people from a different point of view and have maybe
Yeah.
a different kind of respect for what they're able to do and break down some of those kind of
Yeah,
expectations.
I think the idea is with expectation is try not have a big expectation on an individual. Always try and have an open minded.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you know someone's struggling to do a task, just don't stand or watch them. That's the most cruel thing.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, even if they don't say they need help.
Agreed. So Kieran, I've got like maybe 1 more minute to ask you one more question, and then we can come back to some of this in the Q&A. Hand over to Tracy. But before we do that, what do you think could make planning even better than you've already experienced?
What could make planning even better?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's no a big expectation, and it's no low expectation, and it's not rocket science, and it's just this: just listen, just listen. Because I know in this modern day in society, people interrupt and cut when someone's saying, just listen. When someone when someone's explaining a dream, just listen. That's like the best thing you can do. And what I was quote when I say what was the quote is that we're not a service, we're a community. Yeah.
Not a service.
Because a community brings people together.
Mm. So planning helps build better communities, and then would be more communities for people.
Yeah, that's what we do. We forge a community, not a service. Service has to get paid, so we forge a community.
Nice. I think that's a good place to pause those thoughts. And I can see that Lee is agreeing with what you said, so that's good. Tracy, are you around? Thank you so much for that, Kieran. I'll give you a round of applause because it's just you can hear. And Tracy, I'll go to watch the Q&A, and I'll keep an eye on if you want to move forward with the webinar. So over to you. Thanks.
Brilliant. Thanks, Scott. And Kieran, thank you so much for that. And I think there's so much, isn't there, that comes through that around planning. It's that bit about having dreams and, not having those dreams squashed, but actually people exploring with you how those dreams can be realized and what steps you need to do to get there. And I'm just reminded so much of something that a parent said to me fairly recently, which was, why should my son's aspirations be limited by what his social worker or his educational support workers have experienced themselves?
I think it says a lot. Oh, sorry.
No, go on, Kieran. Go on.
I think it tells you a lot how confident my school is as well. I remember when my teachers used to say, "This is the best school in Edinburgh." I used to go, "Yeah, best at being the worst."
And there is that thing, isn't there? You talked a lot about relationships and actually knowing somebody, listening to what they're really saying. And that was brilliant. Yeah. Thank you so much, Kieran. Yeah. At this point, I'm going to bring in Sylvia Todman and Leanne Darien. Sylvia and Leanne both know Kieran well and have done work with him as well in the past. But they are both health and wellbeing practitioners who work for Thistle. And if you haven't come across Thistle, Thistle's an organisation that's Edinburgh based, and it supports people with long-term conditions and disabilities to live life in the way that they choose to, whatever that looks like for the individual. So I'm going to ask you both to say a wee bit about yourself, but I'm going to come to you, Leanne, first, because I know from things we were saying earlier, some of the things you've got around expectations and some of the things that Kieran was talking about, I think you may well want to pick up on as well. So I'm going to come to you, Leanne, first. Would you like to say a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, thank you, Tracy. So one of the things that you won't be able to see because of where my webcam is I'm actually a wheelchair user myself. So I have spina bifida, which means I've had my own experience of leaving and transitioning from high school distinctly longer ago than Kieran did. But I experienced that breakdown in that transition and that loss of relationship with the head of learning support. And it was purely down to I was 17, I wanted to make my own decision on something, and they thought the complete opposite. And they kept pressuring me to try and come over to their side, to the point that it had me in tears several times throughout the year. And what I experienced a lot growing up is a sense of being wrapped in bubble wrap, a fear of that everyone had around me of me failing, that I couldn't handle that I, because of my disability, that I couldn't cope with any sort of failure. And honestly, it put a lot of anxiety in me for years about something going wrong, because I thought I'm not going to be able to cope. So what I think the key message is for me is that we don't remember the times that we don't succeed in something, that we maybe have to go on and do something else, maybe something doesn't work out for us. What we remember is that the people around us have our back, that they help us to explore other options, that they help treat us as emerging adults coming through high school and going to college or work afterwards, or whatever life was going on to. And that's what I love so much about working with Thistle, and seeing the big plan, and actually seeing the fact that, okay, it's the person's voice first, and just focusing so much on these strengths and resources that these young people have, and developing the skills and their hopes and dreams. It's just incredible to me, and it's not something I experienced growing up. So I'm so happy to be able to give that to someone else.
Leanne, that's great. And you haven't made reference to this, but I will, because I know that you're a qualified psychologist. So what you were saying there about, it's not the failure that impacts us so much as what happens around that. It's whether people have got our backs. It's how well they help us to pick ourselves up and try the next thing, and try a new dream and find something different to follow through. And I think, that's that, especially from a psychologist, who understands how we're wired. I think that's a really important thing to be aware of. Thank you. Sylvia, I'm going to come on to you. Do you want to say a wee bit about your role within Thistle and what you do around the planning area?
Yeah, so Leanne and I we're quite a small team. I think we're the equivalent of 1.3 full-time equivalents, and our friend Jill, who's around here but not on screen, is 4 extra hours a week. And what we try and do is engage with young people, and you can email us and just get in touch with us if you're a young person aged between 16 and 25. Or we have schools engagement work where and I think Kieran was mentioning this, which was formerly our interact work. So we actually contact schools, and we're in the process of doing this just now. We go in and meet schools and say, we'd like to spend some time with your young people and do some fun things, which will be around with an idea of sort of thinking about what a good future looks like for each individual young person. So we've moved on from the interact and the drama, and what we're piloting this year is slightly scary, but it's going to be a lot of fun. There's a wheelchair, basketball, all ability bikes, and art combo. And we've had pretty good response from our schools so far. So if you've got a young person in a school, and it can be a mainstream school or a school for young people with disabilities, and you haven't heard about us, then mention to your school and ask them to get in touch with us, and we'd love to talk with them. So we do this, and then we invite our young people to come along to our big plan, which is our person-centred planning big group session, which I think Kieran was mentioning as well. I don't know if there's anything specifically you'd like to know about that, Tracy.
Well, I was going to ask Sylvia and Leanne as well, when you're at the very beginning of that planning process, where does that plan start? How do you get the ball rolling? What's the most important thing to focus on right at the beginning there?
So we have a question, and we ask our young people, and it's quite a long question, but I'll share it with you if that's all right. And the question we ask at the very beginning is, what would it take for this young person to have an interesting, fulfilling life where they can get to know people who will become their friends, and they're able to make their contribution to their local community? And that is our starting point, that we believe that every young person has a contribution to make to society in one way or another, and we're going to help that young person figure out what that contribution, what they want that to be.
And how do you do that? How do you actually help to work with a young person in that kind of a way? I'm guessing at the start of the planning process, maybe that's a conversation that they haven't really had before, and there's going to be all sorts of anxieties and things around that, around change and all of that kind of stuff, and being asked big questions. How do you break that down and help them with that?
Yeah, so to go just even a step before that then, so I think this was something Kieran mentioned, the environment, and something we spoke to Declan, another one of our young people, yesterday, and said, what did what do you like about the big plan? And he said, you know, it's the atmosphere. So we start off, the welcome is very important to us. We set up a welcoming atmosphere. We always have food. Everything that Thistle YP does involves food. So the project runs in the evenings. People can come after school and we come along, we have a buffet and people sort of have a little chat. And each young person is invited to bring everybody who's important to them in their lives. So it might be their family, their siblings, it might be a professional person. And then we also have a group supporter who is there in the group championing each young person. So they've got this group supporter there who's going to support them. So we start off with just sort of a kind, friendly, warm environment, and it just sets a tone for something that just seems to work.
Is there anything that you'd like to add to that, Leanne, around getting the young person actively involved and the family involved in the planning process effectively?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I actually really noticed in the sessions that I've attended so far, so I'm pretty much new to the YP team. I joined in May this year. And actually one of the things that struck me coming along was the young people actually being handed the microphone. So actually magnifying their voice and allowing them the chance to speak out in the group and have their voice heard by, there's not only everyone that mattered to them, but there's a room full of people who are just validating everything that they're saying and helping them come up with other ideas. And, you know, there's real sort of supportive interplay between everyone.
Yeah, I think there's something really important about that, isn't there? And I've had conversations with people fairly recently about different ways of getting the young person's views and voice across, because one of the challenges can be if they can't attend meetings or they find that really difficult, or speaking up when there's, you know, a room full of people that they don't really know very well. You know, so using things like recording on a smartphone or writing something in their own words, or, you know, whatever it may be, making a wee video perhaps of a Talking Mats conversation or something like that. Anything that actually gets them and their voices right at the center of the process and keeps our attention on the fact that this is about a young person's life. It's not about a process. It's not about doing something to somebody. It's about working with them to see what's going to come out of this for them. And you don't really know where the end of that journey is going to be when you start the process. You know, the process is part of it, and seeing where that leads them. I was interested though, Sylvia, you were saying about, you know, sort of having everybody in there at the start of the planning process. Family, could be siblings, could be other friends and so on. I know people often say for parents and families that it's their transition as well as their young person's, because everything's changing around them. Why do you think it matters? What difference does a good plan make to that bigger group as well as the young person? What difference does it make to the parents and carers and siblings and so on?
I think you're right, Tracy. It's a transition for the whole family when a young person leaves school, and there's a huge amount of anxiety around that. So to know that there's a plan in place that's focusing on something the young person wants to achieve, and when we talk about dreams and we talk about gifts and we talk about strengths, and you might not achieve your dream, but what Kieran and Declan were saying to us is that there's not a right or wrong answer in the big plan. And Leanne and I were a bit taken aback with this when Declan said that yesterday. It's like, well, of course not. But it was, you know, it's like, but you know, in a lot of other times people ask a question and there is a right or wrong answer, and there isn't. So it's very open at the beginning, and we're going to aim really high. We've got massive expectations, and which I think everybody accepts. None of us achieve all of our dreams in life, but we've got these things here, and for the family to know that then we're going to look, we scale right back down, and in the last couple of sessions we look at the tiny steps that we're going to start taking in the direction of the dream. And I think it's very reassuring for people to go away just with this plan.
Brilliant. Thanks, Sylvia. And I'm just going to ask, because somebody's asked in the Q&A, for a little more information about what the big plan is and how it works, because I know you started to introduce that and then we went down a bit of a tangent. So let's come back to the big plan, and can you explain a little bit more about how it works?
Yeah, sorry, I thought you maybe heard a bit much of me, but Leanne, shall I start off and then you can fill in the bits of myths? So yeah. We have about 10 or 12 young people and their families and supporters, and we have 6 or 7 sessions, and we run them here in Thistle at our hub, which is a nice large glass walled building, and we come in and in each session we focus on a different topic. So we might be looking at your dreams. So we're going to have big posters. I think the one that Kieran mentioned was labels to badges. So that one, it's one of my favourite ones, and we do it fairly early on. So we start off, and the facilitator, which might be me, we put on our labels. So I'm left-handed, I'm quite clumsy, I'm kind of chaotic and untidy. These are all my labels. That's Sylvia, and it's all useful things, and it's all me. And then we take the labels off and we throw them away, and we put on our badges. And actually, I'm a mum and I go running quite successfully. Just like so this labels to badges exercise just sort of sets a really nice scene. We're focusing on strengths. This approach is all about being strength based. And we try and sort of communicate and work with our young people in a way that becomes absolutely clear. This is how we work.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the key thing for me is the labels are very the surface. You've not gotten to know me. You're just looking at what can I see just looking at you, or a very disinterested conversation could probably bring out. But actually the badges and getting to know the qualities and, like you were saying, the strengths and resources that these young people have that a lot of people don't pay attention to, and it's
And so at the end of that process, what does the young person and the family have at the end of that process to take on with them into the next steps, whatever those next steps seem to be?
Our final sessions are our community connections, where our families we'll have some big posters, and our families will all write up, this was something that's worked for our family, this is something our young persons found helpful. And we'll go around, people will have an ask, say, I'd be interested in working in a cafe. So, my local cafe takes on young people for work experience. So we make these community connections, and everybody goes off with the next steps. And then 6 months later, we'll come back again. And really, we were quite overwhelmed at our last, it was just before the summer, we had our 6-month follow-up to our most recent big plan. And we had people who'd got jobs in cafes. We had got people who'd won awards for cooking. We had just like so many different things, didn't we, Leanne? We had people who'd made videos and had films published. And
even staying overnight in a hotel for the first time and actually managing that. And it doesn't matter what the hope is, it's what matters to the person. If we can make that happen, no matter how small it seems to us, it's massive for these young people.
And it gives you the real confidence and hope then, if you can look back and say, well, I achieved this, I wanted to do that, I managed to do it. That gives you the confidence and the hope for the future, doesn't it? For the next thing you want to do and the next thing. That's great. Thank you very much. The last thing I'm going to ask before we move on is it's really some kind of advice based on your experience of working with young people and with families. And I think there might be people on the call who've having experience, maybe they're having experience at the moment of planning that isn't really happening in a person-centered way, or maybe they're struggling to get that sort of engagement around it. Have you got any tips or advice for if you're in that situation? What can you do to make it better? How can you maybe turn that around? How could you change that to make it a little bit more person-centered?
Yeah, one of the things that we do is we worked in partnership with a charity in Ireland called Parents Plus. And what we do from that is we're trying to run a Parents Plus course for parents or carers of people with special needs. So we run a 7-week course, Sylvia. Sorry, I thought I was going to blank that there. And we do different topics each week, which can be things like supporting other siblings, supporting your own self-care, supporting your young person through different parts of their emotional transition. But the most important thing is actually getting the parents together and allowing them sort of probably for the first time a form of actually just sitting and chatting about what's going on for them and for their family. And some of the things they've come back with. So Sylvia, I think we had a parent that spoke about going into a meeting and seeing that it was a case of the chairs all lined up on one side, which was going to be all the professionals, and a chair off to one side, which was going to be for them. So actually going in and taking the power of, no, I'm going to move these chairs and make it more inclusive and more friendly for me, was one of the things that was brought up. Sylvia?
Yeah, and so we do a session on communicating assertively, and I find that useful myself, but our parents, the feedback on that one's been good as well. So maybe you go into a room and you're with a lot of professionals, and it's just remember in your own mind, you're the expert. You've got 16 years lived experience with this young person. So you may not have professional qualifications, but you're very much an expert in your family and your young person. So have that confidence in your own absolute skills and talents, which is something the social workers or anybody else who's in the room won't have. And you might not be in a person-centered planning session, but you can sort of tweak a meeting in the direction of being a person-centered meeting. And the way you would do that is you're focusing on the young person and the young person's choices, not what's easiest for the professionals helping you to sort of mold you in the direction of. We'd always suggest, think about your best hopes for the meeting before you go. What would you hope to come out of that meeting? If that meeting went as well as any meeting could ever go, what would you have achieved there? Consider bringing a friend, maybe an advocate, but I know before I started this job, my friend who's got a son who's autistic had a meeting at school and she said, will you come? And I thought, oh, I'm not going to be much help, but I came and at one point I was able to say, just a moment, what I'd like to hear what Emma's thoughts are on this. So I felt like, bring a friend who's got your back. It can just give you confidence as well. And just communicating assertively means you're not being aggressive, you're not being passive, you're just saying clearly and calmly what's important to you, and that's a very valuable skill.
And sometimes we've got to remember when we're going into these meetings what were the things that we wanted to say. So sometimes actually having either a script or a bullet pointed sheet of paper for us, just to help us remember when that stress hits, all the things that we wanted to say can be an invaluable tool.
I think there was a parent who wasn't heard in one meeting and wasn't given the opportunity to speak. So the next meeting, she took a prepared written statement, and she said, I didn't get a chance to tell you this at the beginning of the next meeting. She read out her statement just to set the scene so that the meeting would then progress in the direction she hoped it would.
That's really helpful, because I think sometimes it can feel like a meeting is something that's happening, and as a young person or as a parent or a carer, you're not quite sure if you're allowed to do that. And absolutely, that's something that you need to do. That there's some really good tips there. Thank you, both of you. We will come back to you again a little bit later. I would just say, for anybody who wants to ask any questions, carry on putting your questions in the Q&A. You could ask questions to anybody who's on the call individually, or to all of us when we get to that point. Then we can all respond to any questions or thoughts that you might have. But I'm going to move on now to bring in Lee. Lee, if you can switch your camera on. And Sylvia and Leanne, that's lovely. Thank you.
Hello.
Hi, Lee. I'm going to leave you. Lee is from ILF Scotland, and he's the engagement and events officer for ILF Scotland. I think you've got a bit of background noise in the background there, but Lee, you can explain what's going on, okay? And I'll let you introduce yourself. Okay.
No worries. Well, firstly, just an apology. I'm actually in Starbucks today. I'm out and about a lot, and we're doing a big event over the next couple of days at the SECC. So I was loading in this morning. I wasn't going to get home in time, so I've had to stop in so I could obviously be here with you today. I didn't want to miss it, so I'm sorry if there's a little bit of background noise. I'm going to hold my mic closer. Hopefully that cuts it out, and I'll be as quick as possible. But yeah, as Jason said, I'm the Events and Engagement Officer for ILF. So everything that we do in terms of promoting the work that we do, I'm out and about at events, engaging with parents and families, and working with the team, our casework team, and also the assessors to make sure that everything's going well in terms of the transition fund that we have, but also our other fund that we run in the background as well. I'll just touch on before I start, because it will make sense if I do this, what the ILF Transition Fund is. So the fund is for 16 to 25-year-olds living with a disability, as defined in the Equality Act 2010, to access funding up to £4,000 per year. And it's all about spending time with other people in the community, reducing isolation, and trying something new as our tagline. So it's really about, especially after the pandemic, making sure that we get young people the opportunity to get out and do what they're passionate about and drive change in young people. That's really what the fund is about. Is driving them on to either a career change or just trying something that they love to do, but getting opportunities to again. As I say, the pandemic's created a whole new sort of a wave of interest because services were, a lot of the services were closed after or through the pandemic. So we do see that coming through. But one of the bits I'm here to talk about today of the application process, and as I said, happy to answer any questions about the fund at the end, or I can follow up after. But we're talking about person-centred planning today, and we really wanted to raise this. This is fantastic that we can come on and speak to lots of people about it because we want more people to take advantage of this. So the Young Person's Planning Grant was brought in a couple of years ago. We're actually into our 5th year of the fund, which we celebrate later this year with a big event. And a couple of years ago, I think it was actually 3 years ago, we've seen that a lot of the applications weren't really hitting the mark. And when I say that, I mean just people weren't unsure about what they wanted to do. And we know within disability, a lot of young people do apply for their own funding, and sometimes they maybe can't represent how best to put the plan together. So we've offered this young person's planning grant. One of the initial ones we had was a young person who had applied to get some funding. He wanted to appear on Britain's Got Talent, which is a fantastic goal to have for a young person. He wanted to audition and do all his work towards that. But we found by looking at his application and working with him, one of our assessors did a bit of work with him, that we found that just by doing a little bit of work on person-centred planning, which we'd recently been trained in, we kind of brought his long-term goals into some short-term goals. Nothing wrong with that long-term goal, but just working with him identified that some of the things that he could be working on and we could fund in the meantime. So that was really where some of the basis of it came about. We just found that young people sometimes maybe just can't put what they want to say, depending on the disability they have, or they might not have a person that can apply on their behalf. So all these things came into play, and we just thought it would enhance the experience, but also enhance the application. That one of the main things I love about our person-centred planning grant that you can get before you apply is that it doesn't come off your total of £4,000, which I think is phenomenal that it was agreed to do that. So we see a plan come in about typically on average around £600 to £700. So the idea is that a young person would apply. So online is where we do all our applications. If you apply for the person's grant, it takes you a separate, the first 6 sort of pages of the application. The idea with the grant is which I'll touch a bit more on in the detail how you do it, is that it would lead you on to fill a full application, and the person that you're working with can then support you to do that. So what we say is that you go out and identify someone in your area. We do have a list of services available across Scotland on our FAQ website. We're building and adding more in by the week, really. People getting in touch wanting to work with us and being a good network. You identify who we'd like to work with. It's all about personal choice and control with ILF. You would get a quote for that work that you want to do. It could be a 6-week plan, a 6-month plan, a year, whatever would work for you. And the idea is they come out and work with you via online or in person now that we're back out and about, and they talk about your long-term goal, but they work back the way. So the person-centred plan that we were trained in was looking towards that end goal, but in the meantime, who was going to be in my circle of trust? Who was going to work with me? Who was going to be my base? What was my passions, my interests, and what were the short-term goals that we could achieve? So when we did that one with the guy that wanted to be in Britain Got Talent, he actually, by working with him, we identified that he wanted to do some recording of music and teach people how to write songs with his own disability, which was autism. So we looked at that and we ended up being able to fund him for the guitar, the studio setup, but also in the long term, looking at his laptop and his blogging so he could create his video content to allow him to apply for Britain's Got Talent. But just doing that little bit of work, and it was interesting just what Kieran said earlier on, which really stood out for me was listen. And that's what person-centred planning about is all really about for me. Is just listening to that young person, what their goal is, what they're excited about, and what Kieran said as well about their dream. Everyone's got their dream about what they want to do, and a part of the funding idea is to bring some of it to life and get them started. So it's really a case of going through that process on the application. The first 6 pages will take you through it. You get your funding. So the quote would come in. Our team at the casework would look at it, assess it, and let you know if you've been successful. You would then go away and secure your plan, do your work, and then, as I said, the idea is that this would lead into a full application. And just to mention again that money that you got for your plan does not come off your £4,000. You've still got your £4,000 to apply for. So that's really the quick fire in terms of the idea behind it. but we really want to kind of raise it because we do get a lot of applications asking for the grant, but we should be seeing a lot more coming through, but in terms of the amount of people that could access this fund in Scotland. We've done a lot of work. One of my colleagues is on today, Cheryl. We've actually worked quite closely together this year to make sure we reach rural areas, people off the mainland that maybe not be able to access some of this or have heard about it. Some of the areas where we're not getting enough applications, we've been working there. Also working to bring in the deaf community closer to the disabled world because they feel quite disconnected. Care experienced people, just everything that we can do within our small team to make sure that people get access to this fund and get a chance to apply for it who should be applying for it. And just to touch on as well, I mentioned about the Disability Equality Act. A lot of people ask, and the misconception is our fund is just physical disability. It's if you look at that act, it covers everything from mental health, ADHD, autism, physical disability, learning disabilities, visual impairments, hearing impairments. It covers everything. A lot of our applications, just to throw out a stat before we kind of finish up, 15% of our applications before the pandemic mentioned mental health. We're now, I think the last time we checked a few months ago, it was over 55%. So it kind of tells you where we are after the pandemic and the impact that's had on young people. This is why I think the Young Person's Planning Grant is really important to get access to. And to me, it's a win-win because even if you didn't decide to go on and apply, you've had a plan designed for you to help you move forward. Again, like Kieran was saying, it's all about listening and working with that person you choose to work with. We want to hear about your goals. I love hearing about young people's intentions, what they want to do. And part of the ILF Transition Fund and why it's been such a success is that we can make that happen for young people and get them on the right road to driving change in their life and just getting the same opportunities that everyone wants in life to just live your life, do the things you want to do and enjoy yourself. And that's what it's all about. So that's I know that's quite quick fire, but I'm just conscious of our time today, but hope that's covered everything, Tracy.
Yeah, that's
and it wasn't
great.
too noisy in the background. I'm sorry, I'm
It
holding
wasn't
this
too
up.
noisy in the background. No, it was absolutely fine. Thanks, Lee. And I think that whole opportunity to get the person-centered planning grant to apply for that, I think is a really incredibly valuable one. And I know that sometimes when you're talking to people, they don't necessarily understand how important that plan is. And it's not because that ties you into something. It's because it helps you focus on something that you can actually be working towards and setting your goals and setting your aspirations. There's just for a couple of people who've sort of mentioned in the Q&A there, if you're in an area where maybe you don't have Thistle, you don't have, you're not quite sure who does this kind of planning with you, how can you find out who might be able to help you with that? Supposing you're given the grant, but then where do you go to be able to spend that money?
So initially for person-centered planning, they would have to identify who they want to work with. So our FAQs on our website have, as far as I know, we've just changed over to a new website. We have some links available to people around Scotland who offer that. Again, it's really down to that young person to go out and find who they would like to work with, and that's where we give the choice and control. If they're struggling, they maybe, like you say, they're rurally, they're kind of detached from the mainland, they need some support, they can call into our office. We've got a fantastic casework team who could support, but we also have a transition fund manager, Ian, who's very experienced, and our transition fund assessor, Cheryl, as I say, who's on the call today. She has got bags of knowledge, and we will be able to support and try and support you in terms of finding someone that would be suitable for you. But we try to make it so the young person has the choice and control. That's what ILF's all about, really giving that option out. But we're also there to support. So if you had any issues with it, do get in touch with our office, and we can look into it for you.
Brilliant. And there's a question in the chat that says, does the planning grant mean someone works with the young person to create the plan, or is it something that you do at home? It's somebody working with them one-to-one, isn't it? Pretty much on an individual basis. It's not something that you're kind of handed and then you do it yourself. It is actually
you're getting someone. We've had through the pandemic, or the tail end of the pandemic, a lot of people doing it online and offering that service, which was fantastic. I love this new hybrid world that we're working in. But also now that we're back open, people they would visit you in your own home. They could meet in a separate area. It would all be about, again, your choice of what you would like to do, and the young person being at the heart of the plan is the most important thing. Again, I reiterate what Kieran says. A fantastic comments earlier on about just listening. It's such a simple thing, but just listening to that young person and them leading it as much as they can. And that's the exciting thing about person-centered planning, is that when we got trained in the office, it really touched quite heart to my heart about some of the things that I wasn't thinking about in life. I was thinking, oh, I could maybe work on that, or I could maybe start doing that in my life, and I haven't thought about maybe working towards that goal, or maybe I could do this in short term. It just gets the sort of the juices flowing for the young person and get them excited, and just pulling out those little nuggets of information about something that they maybe not been able to display, and just filling out a standard sort of application form. I always, first thing I ask when I meet young people at events, as I say, we'll be at the SEC the next couple of days. I'll plug there if you're coming along, have a chat with me. But the first thing I always ask is, I don't even talk about the fun. It's like, what's your favourite? What are you into? What do you like doing? And it just gets that excitement going about the what their passion and goals are, and then you can start to think, right, you could actually have funding for this, or you could maybe get some planning around that. So it's a really important thing that Kieran said. I think it's the key theme to today's seminar webinar has been just listening to people, listening to young people, and understanding what they want to do, and not misreading it, and just giving them time to display how they feel, which is really important. And that's a big part of what we like the planning offering out to people to be.
That's lovely. Thanks, Lee. I've just got one more question for you, and then I'm going to ask everybody to turn their cameras back on, and we'll go through some more of the questions that people have been putting in. But this is: can you apply for the person-centered planning grant more than once, or is it just once, or can you come back maybe a couple of years later? Perhaps when you've done 2 or 3 other things, and you're looking at the next steps again. Can you get that more than once?
That's actually a really good question. I know that with the transition fund, you can. So if you still fit the criteria of the age, living in Scotland, and disabilities defined in the Equality Act, and have less than a certain amount of savings, you get your money. If, say, you got your full grant, once your money goes in, you have a year, and then we would ask for receipts. Once that's signed off and you still fit the criteria, you can reapply again. I am assuming that would be for the planning grant if required. I will double check that, and I will. I've not been asked that before, and I'm not 100% sure, because I've not heard of anyone using it again the second year. But it's a great question, and I will find out and feed it back, and you can let people know. Definitely.
Lovely. Thanks, Lee. Right, I'm going to ask everyone to switch their cameras back on, if you will. Sylvia and Leanne and Kieran and Scott. And I can see, Scott, you're typing some answers to some questions that are coming up in the chat, but well, it's the Q&A, isn't it? But if anybody, do feel free to keep putting those questions in there. The one I'm going to pick out to start off with is, and this could be for anybody really, how do you help someone with communication difficulties to be involved in the planning process? And that links with a question that someone else had asked about whether it's how do you work with people who maybe are non-verbal to be able to get them involved as well. Kieran, I'm going to come to you first, because you've very politely put your hand up there. What's your thoughts on that one? How can you get people involved?
How you can get people involved? I think the best way to get people involved is making it inclusive. I could find other ways that you can communicate someone who's non-verbal, whether that through typing or sign language, anything, or even drawing the idea, the big plot. Center plan is a universal thing. You don't have to write your dreams. You can also draw. You do a drawing, I don't know, driving a car, if that's your interest in. And it's not like oh, you have to type it or write it down or speak it. As long people's there to witness and you to explain, so you as the person who's non-verbal, then yeah, it's universal for anyone.
Lovely, thanks, Kieran. There's somebody who's put in the Q&A here as a response. My daughter had a plan done through ILF, and she is non-verbal. She was fully included, which is great. I'm glad to hear that. Sylvia and Leanne, do you have anything to add around how you can make that inclusive for everybody, even if they've got communication difficulties?
Yeah, certainly it's a good question, and I think certainly the big plan, we have had people who don't communicate verbally, but I think even if you don't communicate verbally, you do communicate. So, and we welcome everybody along. Just thinking back to the last big plan, we had people who I didn't have a huge high level of verbal skills, and because a lot of our work is done with art, so we're drawing and things. And at the last big plan, in fact, we had people who didn't even want to come inside our building, and we kind of moved. We got a fire pit, and we kind of moved outside, and we had somebody who didn't want to get out of their car, so we kind of worked with them then. So I think, you know, we really welcome everybody, every young person. Ideally, we'll get you to come along in 5th year of high school, so your penultimate year, come along. We will work with you and we will meet you where you are and to help you create your big plan. So just get in touch with us.
Thank you. Leanne, do you want to add anything to that, or Lee? I think we were looking, because there are so many different ways, aren't there? Sorry, Kieran, were you going to come in there? Someone had mentioned maybe using social stories. We talked earlier about perhaps videoing somebody, videoing a talking Matt's conversation, something like that. Just as you were saying there, Sylvia, it's about meeting the person where they are, and whatever communication style they use, starting with that. There was another question that I'm going to ask all of you, actually. We'll start, Kieran, if it's okay, I'll start with you again. And it was, what do you think it's really important to think about or include when you're planning? What are the most important things you need to get in there?
One, if it's accessible, like for everyone, like when what you're planning in is like how can you like make this thing possible for this person? Like if you're the person who's advocating for that person, like, and they've described your dreams to you, and the best thing you can do is help them while listening and go on with that, like help them make that task possible, even if the person is non-verbal. Like communication isn't just like being verbal speaking. Communication can be other ways, like even if it's like drawing and all that. Like it's more like finding a plan, how to make that plan possible.
Lovely. Yeah. Thanks, Kieran. Would anyone else like to come in on that? What are the most important things, or what's really, really important to have there in the plan?
I think finding out the values that sort of underpin it. Why does this young person hope or have the goal to achieve this? You know, if they're wanting to learn how to drive, is it maybe a case of they're maybe looking for independent travel? So is there anything else that they can do if maybe through their disability, maybe driving isn't an option for them? So finding out what underpins what they want can really help to identify if and only if alternatives are needed.
I think as well, it's just exploring every possible avenue to make. I know it sounds quite cheesy, but exploring every possible avenue to make the young person's passion, vision, goal, dream come alive and get them excited about moving forward in life and moving on to the next step. And I think transition, even though our fund is 16 and 25, a transition can happen at any point in your life. You know, it doesn't have to be leaving school or just going on to a new job. You know, it can happen at any point through different walks of life and different things that you go through. So it's such a key thing, person-centred planning, and I don't think it's utilised enough, especially in Scotland. So it's really important that we get people excited about it and get them applying and doing sort of the things that you've been talking about today, just to make things happen for young people. And it's also you look at, people sometimes forget this, is the economic impact of young people working or moving forward with new goals and getting out in the communities, because it can really bring a lot back in. And there is that sort of work that they do in the background about looking at the impact it does have on the economy in Scotland, and especially after COVID as well. So the young people, I know again it sounds cheesy, but they are the future of everything, you know. So it's a very important that we take, like Kieran said and Leanne said, just take the time to listen and take the time to explore every possible avenue to make something happen for that young person.
Thanks, Lee. Scott, I'm going to land on you as well. Have you got anything to add into that? What do you think is really, really important to have in the plan?
Not really anything to add. It's more of like the elephant in the room, I think. sometimes you can have the best plan in the world and you can have the best resources in the world, but the services that need to support that plan don't exist at the other end. So I don't want to make out that we're like, yes, you know, the world is perfect if you get this stuff. There's still a lot of work we need to do in making sure that person-centered planning people are available across the whole of Scotland, that services that when people have this budget and money, that they can use it in a way that's really effective. Like Kieran, if you don't mind me mentioning, I know that through the ILF fund, you've got driving lessons and things sorted, and you're having a hard time finding a driving instructor who is competent enough to help you learn to drive with your autism diagnosis. Is that something you want to talk about, Kieran, or?
Yeah, I'm still like finding like yeah, it's not just that. It's like one like some like are like in locations like are not accessible if you're in Edinburgh. Like if you're on the waiting list, like there's like ones in Glasgow and or up north, and but there's not really much really in Edinburgh, so didn't.
Can I just touch on that as well? We are finding with the applications that are coming through, just to touch on your point about driving, is that there's such a backlog at the moment for people doing their test, and it's up to 6 months. So that's enhanced the pressure of trying to find someone that the young person's happy with and they want to work with. And not all driving instructors will work with young people with disabilities. So there is few and far between. But in rural, what we've tried to do in terms of the funding process is if people are rural, but they would like to come into the mainland to do an advanced drive, a week's course or something like that. We're now starting to consider that. We're trying to be as flexible as possible to support people who might not get the access. So, but I understand what Kieran's saying. It is the services are key. What Scott said as well. You need to have the services there. You can put the plan together, but you need to have people there to provide it. So we are seeing that slowly starting to move forward but because of COVID, there's been such a lot of people either being moved on or paid off or shut down, and we found it through so many things that people have applied for. But we try to be as flexible as possible if you are applying through us to support the young person in terms of finding somewhere that you can use the money. But we're open to looking at everything. But yeah, it's a tough time, but we're hopefully starting to turn the corner.
Yeah, Wales on that. I have that, like for example, I feel a bit like guilty because like I'm be like, having that ILF account for 2 years and I haven't used it because there's no the resources. Like not like I have the resources to get the driving, but like I said, there's no availability for it. Like
we've seen that a lot across the pandemic, is that we've extended a lot of it. It's a year grant. We've extended a lot of awards into second and third years because of COVID. And again, we are, as an organisation, very flexible about supporting that young person and making sure that we can do that. And that's what I love about the fund, is that if you weren't enjoying something halfway through the year, you could contact us and we could redirect the money, because we know that things can change for young people. They might have an interest elsewhere. So we try to do everything we possibly can to work on a case-by-case basis, and rather than just put a blanket over it, we try to work individually. And that's why our team, I think, are really special, and they really work hard to kind of support that young person and the family, or whoever's working with a young person too. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, Kieran, thank you for sharing that. And I know that ILF are really flexible in understanding there are barriers to achievement with it. But I just kind of wanted to make the point that planning's crucial, but also when you have plans, it also shines a light on where there are gaps for people to achieve and where the support is. And not all of it is actually about services. Sometimes it's about community and communities who are ready to have spaces for people that are accessible as well. So
yeah.
Through all of this, I guess why planning is important is because it shines a light on all of that, whereas before it might not do if people are just heading in a direction that's been predetermined. Sorry, Kieran, I totally interrupted.
Yeah, I know. I like I've got this like I don't know if it's normal. You can like validate with this, but you know how I talked about for like over 2 years, but the driving lesson thing, like I wanted to drive. I said like that in like 2 years after two big plans, and I'm still not there yet. And I feel guilty because I've influenced other young people that things are possible, and I'm still at point A trying to get the driving thing. But I feel a bit guilty that I'm not like like people say, oh, how's the driving thing? I'm still getting there. Like I don't know if it's normal to feel like self guilt like that. So
don't forget, there's so many other young people in your position after COVID and still just trying to find that service that suits their needs. So never feel guilty. If you ever need any support, you just give the team a call. We'll do our best to help you out there.
Yeah.
I think there's a couple of questions in the Q&A. I'm going to link them together because I think they're related, but it's around how you approach the planning process with someone who hasn't, well, in one case, it's someone who hasn't accepted they're leaving school, maybe because they can't process that change, so they're struggling with that. So how do you start working with them and preparing them? And then where a young person, I think this is probably a related issue really, where the young person's so demand avoidant that they won't go to meetings or fill in forms or have those conversations. And I'm linking those two together, not because they're identical situations, but because I kind of suspect that probably at the bottom of it, it's that young person's anxiety around change and what's about to happen. That's making that a difficult conversation to have. So Leanne, can I come to you first? If would you how would you approach something like that?
I think when someone's emotions are so up and really quite heightened in that moment, actually working on them with anxiety and sort of calming that anxiety response down, so doing stress management techniques can sometimes be a useful sort of starting point, and actually just getting to know them and getting them comfortable with us and trying to, I guess, create an environment where they can feel more open to actually talking about how they're feeling.
Okay, lovely, thank you. Sylvia, would you like to add anything to that?
Yeah, I think, yeah, both difficult situations, but again, I think coming back to, so person-centered planning on a one-to-one basis can be quite intense. Our big plan program, because it's a group-based thing, it's more informal, and yeah, that might be a nice way to approach it in a group setting.
Mm-hmm. So just to maybe try and take some of the stress out of that situation. And also, I think, you know, the one thing that I would kind of add in, I know it doesn't always feel like that because you're very often you're under pressure to move things forward, but sometimes young people just need more time, you know, and actually to be feeling that they can move this forward at their pace, because that's, you know, that's what makes sense to them. The more that they're tried to, well, for me as well as for anybody else, I'm sure if we're under pressure, we're much more likely to go, no, I can't deal with this right now. Taking that time can just be something that they need.
Absolutely, and I think that's what's really useful actually about some of our engagement, actually getting to know people on that sort of one-to-one basis, or, you know, if people aren't ready to come along to the big plan, maybe coming along to our All Ability Bike sessions, either at Salton or at our centre out in Craigmillar, and just really engaging with us in a much more informal, kind of casual way can be a good sort of stepping stone.
Lovely. Scott, I can see that you're going through the Q&A. I'm hoping you're picking a few things out here.
Yeah, I am just trying to kind of read and listen at the same time. So,
yes, so I was doing exactly the same thing, I'm afraid. But Lee, I was just going to ask, someone has asked, how can we as an organisation access the person-centred grant with ILF funding? Can an organisation help access that on behalf of people that they're working with?
Yeah, they can. So you can apply on behalf of someone for the fund or the person-centred planning. We get that a lot. If it is an organisation and they're looking, we do get this quite often as well, if they're looking to put sort of like 15, 20 applications in for it, then all we'd ask is that you contact our transition fund manager, Ian, or the office, because he would probably like to have a chat. And we just look at the best intentions and make sure. The reason we've done that is that there was an issue somewhere in Aberdeen. I can't remember the name of the company, but they went under and they put in a lot of applications. We met with them. We were happy with what they were going to be doing, but they left, and the money they were getting from us for the person-centred planning, they incorporated it into their working figures for the year, and then they went into administration, and then there was about 15, 20 young people that were left with no plans, and we had to redirect elsewhere. So that's the reason why we do it. We just do a bit of due diligence, make sure that the best, best, they're doing the best for the young person. But yeah, we'd look at that. But you can, as I say, apply on behalf of a young person.
Thank you for that, Lee. Also, as well, I think there is, with this in mind, and if you are an organisation, I'm just going to say Thistle, I think, operate only in Edinburgh and potentially some schools outside Edinburgh in the Lothians. So it's an Edinburgh focused service that we're talking about, and I hope that clears something up. But there, I think as organizations, there's maybe now room to start thinking about how do we provide this person-centered planning service, or how do we have somebody in our organization with these skills that we can learn from, like the Thistle and all the work that they do, to allow this to be something that if someone does access the ILF fund for person-centered planning, there is somebody in your local area through your organization who can provide that support and service. So yeah, go for it.
Yeah, thanks, Scott. Just want to say, yeah, you don't have to come to Thistle. You can do your own big plan. Really keen to support other people to run their own big plans and person-centered planning. Last year we ran a person-centered planning big plan facilitator training course, and we had somebody coming over from Dunoon every week. So, although we're pretty much funded for Edinburgh and the Lothians at the moment, we have a conversation with anybody, and if there's anything we can do to support you, we're really happy to do that.
Sylvia, would you mind just explaining what the NIN is?
Dunoon over on the West Coast.
Dunoon.
Yeah, so we ran our facilitator training, and we had people who came across from Fife to do it, and people who came across from Dunoon.
Oh, Dunoon, right? Sorry, I beg your pardon. That's me totally mishearing. Sorry about that.
Thank you. Yeah, I heard Dunoon, Tracy. I don't know that the NIN is something completely different.
Yes, that's what I was thinking.
So there's some comments as questions, and I'm not sure that I'll just read them out. Tracy Campbell has said, just to be clear, my daughter has a communication system and can come in, but we had lots of people here, lots of food, and we all contributed. I'm assuming this is talking about the big plan process or planning process. We'd already spoken a lot about plans, and she had done talking mats. If your child cannot communicate via spoken words, a device, or using their hands, consider what makes the young person light up. I think it would take a good planner, but non-verbal people can be involved. I totally agree, Tracy. It's like this, that there's this, parents also know their children really well. And it's, sometimes parents do have to speak on behalf of their young people or be their communication, because they know what the face looks like if they're happy, or the face looks like when they're not happy, whereas that might be a little bit obscure to other people who've just met them. So what does that person-centered process look like, and how does that, I love the phrase, make the young person light up, because that's what it's all about, isn't it? So some good advice. Also, Tracy asked a question about are there resources out there that can help employers to know how to support work experience or potential employers who might have a disability or autism? This is a question we constantly, as the SDF, put back to Skills Development Scotland and the Modern Apprenticeships Programme and all of that. I don't know, that's from us as an STF perspective, that we work nationally with Skills Development Scotland raising this a lot, and the DIs have done work helping them create resources that are more visual and make a bit more sense to people who might not be as communicative. Sylvia, Leanne, Tracy, Lee, Kieran, I don't know. Kieran, you've had recent recent experience with employment as well. So if anyone wants to come in and just kind of comment on that, I think it would be good. Go for it, Kieran.
Yeah, I think with the employment thing, yeah, it is difficult if you're someone with a disability, like looking for work. Yeah.
It can be hard, and I think, Kieran, you were talking to bring it into a planning perspective. If someone's helped you look to your dreams, and you're like, I want to go and do this, and then you're faced with someone who's like, actually, pal, you can work for 6 hours in the pound store, or do a voluntary job in like Oxfam, or there's a bit of a kind of disconnect from what you want to go do and what kind of people might think your reality is. So how do you think people could maybe challenge that, Kieran?
Challenge that.
Yeah.
My only best way is when you're in that situation, when like is like if people sometimes when someone says like someone misunderstood, it's best to tell no, I didn't say that, I wanted this. Because it's happened before in workplace in college, like the lady called Sandra, I won't mention her too much, just an example. Like she say one thing and you actually do a job like like cleaning and that, and like someone like she didn't make it well to the work placement when I was still in college, but like it was gonna be longer than that, like a year, but I already finished in Christmas because they said the communication thing, and she said to me, "Oh, I can make it well to them," and I had basically no work placement after that, so it looked opportunity as a day off that day. So, but
Yeah, I
then
think
months later to get another work placement, but then they did. It was March. Funny enough, the work placement was going to start was the same day in 2020 when I met Lee.
well,
When I left.
Look at that.
The week after that was COVID lockdown.
There we go. I think there's something in what you're saying though there, Kieran, about being assertive about yourself, and a lot of people aren't in those situations because
Yeah.
when a professional tells you something, you tend to kind of be like, okay, then. And not many people have had gone through a planning process where their assertiveness has been raised and their expectations are higher. And I think that's one of the kind of side effects, a good side effect of person-centered planning.
Yeah, because I think when you've been in these institutions like education, when you have these low expectations, like you as the person, like when you get these like low expectations, this is how workplace was going to be like.
Yeah.
Like most of the time, I didn't really learn anything from the workplace, but that's the only thing I got. The only thing I learned, like you're only like moving stuff. It's not like oh, I'm making myself more employable, but
yeah,
as the person, I don't feel challenged, and recently I'm trying to sharpen my mind because I've noticed like my mind has been like it's not like it's not when unsharp. It's like we're a bit blunt and wise. It's not as sharp as it was like when I was in high school. It was that constant challenge and
yeah.
and like keeping myself busy and like what I need to know is like when I'm looking for a job is like does the person understand what I'm saying, and it's not like they're just like going yeah and and chucking me seeing I'm falling into dark water where I can't see or doing what I'm wrong, or if I'm stuck in somewhere. Like I might be good at communicating, but it's like how do you ask the professional like this, even if it's like in a toxic positive environment, like oh everyone's learned from their mistakes, but if you're saying oh I'm struggling at something
Mm-hmm.
like
I think
like
that's
the
the
support
power.
something's not there. Like
Yeah,
even in college, like when I was in a mainstream course, I was like what I was struggling because the support wasn't really there, and
mm-hmm. Yeah,
the
Kieran, I think
support worker was there, but she was on the other side of the room.
yeah, I think this
But
is
I
all.
like it when someone works with me. They're not.
Kieran, hold your reached for a hot second. I think this is all the power of the fact that you've gone through a process. And I'm sorry to actually interrupt you with that because I know that Leanne and Tracy have got their hands up and we're running close to time. Otherwise, I would let you chat away, as you know. But that's the power, isn't it, of going through a process where people have listened to you and respected your opinions and helped you kind of reach for what you want to do, and then you're confronted by people who might not hold those same values and stuff, and you have to navigate what you feel versus their kind of opinion of you, and those can be different, but without necessarily having that first experience where you've been listened to and it's been life changing because it's given you the confidence, you wouldn't necessarily then be able to kind of, I would say, clap back to people that have low expectations of you. Sorry, Leanne, you've got your hand up for ages and waiting patiently, and I'll shush. And sorry, Kieran, saying hold your weeshed on a recorded call is not the best, but that's where we're at.
Again, it comes from personal experience for me. Actually, as a workplace, just being open to the person and actually creating that honest communication between you. If the person is struggling with something, if it's, I will say, most disabilities, you can overcome any challenge with a bit of creativity. Sometimes it takes a little bit of help to do that, and something like access to work. And I'm sure there's other ones out there that I can't remember them off the top of my head. Will actually come in and assess the sort of situation and have a conversation with both you and the person that you're is going to be working for you. So for me, going into my first workplace, I had a access to work assessor come in, and from that I actually got assisted software. I got a read and write software on my laptop to be able to help me to read documents, because I got headaches quite chronically, and it was not something that I was willing to admit before, because I'd been in a situation where my disability was seen as a weakness. So I didn't want to ask for that extra bit of help, because I thought, oh, this is going to count against me. So actually learning that, yeah, I've got strengths, I've got resources that are going to be valued in this workplace, helped me overcome challenges by allowing me to admit that I was having them in the first place.
Wise words, Leanne. Thank you.
I was just going to very quickly, I know we're almost at the end now, but in relation to, support for employers who are wanting to know how to, sort of help young people. And it's just to draw your attention to a website called Talking About Tomorrow. It's, if you Google, I can't paste the link in the chat, unfortunately, but if you Google Talking About Tomorrow, it should come up. And it's a website that's run by Contact Scotland. And if you go to the page, you'll see on the landing page, there's a page called Getting a Job. And if you go in there, there's several kind of subpages. And one of them is around, sort of what employment opportunities there may be. It's got links to people talking about supported employment, social enterprises. It's also got something that, sort of talks you through what help employers can get if they want to employ disabled people, what financial help they can get, and what advice they can access to be able to do that properly. So I would refer you to that and go and have a look at that. There's a lot of information in there, but it's really useful stuff. Scott, that's over to you. That's me finished.
Yeah, I just seen Kieran has raised his hand. What is there something you want to add, Kieran, to that?
What is you the person with the disability can help your employer? For example, if I have to have sensory overloads, how can I explain to my how do I explain to my employer that I have sensory overloads, who has no knowledge of autism, for example? If I can't handle with a certain sound or a certain smell or that.
Yeah, it's a good question, Kieran. I'm going to open it up to Leanne and Sylvia and Lee.
Hi guys, sorry, I just wanted to jump in. Unfortunately, I need to go. I've got someone else I need to be. So I just want to say a massive thank you for having me on today. And it's been great hearing everyone talk about. It's really got me excited about where we can go with this. And I just want to say thanks for inviting me on. It's been really good. And I will speak to you all soon.
Great to have you, Lee. Thanks very much. Bye.
Bye-bye.
It is 1 o'clock, so I do realise that people are going to have to jump off the call, I guess. Scott, is there anything else that we want to say in winding up?
Yeah, just on the back of Kieran's comment, Sylvia, did you have anything you wanted to kind of come in with?
Well, I just, with your specific comment, Kieran, I think Autism Initiatives run a course for employers. So if you were getting a job, you could point them in the direction of that, so they would understand how to be a sensitive and helpful employer.
Useful advice. Also,
I think there's also, there's just also that thing, isn't there, about making reasonable adjustments for someone with a disability or an impairment of some kind. whatever that happens to be. And if it's an adjustment that can be made, relatively straightforwardly, then you are entitled to ask an employer for that, and they should be in a position to comply with that.
Oh, because
It's more about coming up with a plan, isn't it, and letting them know.
Oh, because sometimes I leave the environment, not in the way of being rude or that, but
just kind of general overload. Yeah. And I think as long as you're open with people and you're actually explaining that and the reason behind it, then I think that then comes into the category for me of a reasonable adjustment that should be made.
Sorry, stop.
No, go for it.
I was going to say there's a lot of value in actually engaging disabled people within the workplace, because actually making those adaptations to your workplace, whether it's a shop or an office or anything like that, for say me as a wheelchair user, take that for an example, you're then going to know that your workplace is going to be accessible for people accessing your service.
Agreed, Leanne, and I think that's a whole topic for a whole another day. But yeah, I think it's really useful to know if that air conditioner is whistling and doing people's heads in.
Yeah. Sometimes I get destructive, so
yeah,
that's not like breaking things.
Yeah, it's how people deal with the stress of sensory overload, Kieran. Yeah.
Well, how do I explain to someone in the workplace when someone in the workplace like freaks out? Oh no, if they get petrified of me, if I break something out of anger.
Yeah. And these are challenges, aren't they, for everybody? I think with an additional support need, disability, autism, neurodivergence, that there are things that people do that to neurotypical people and the normies look a bit weird, and like it can come across a bit startling, but actually it's something that's completely
I don't want to make people feel timid by me, like I did at the parliament when I asked that guy to 20 questions.
Yeah,
I know it's like he was a bit sweating.
Kieran, stories for another day. I'm gonna say we're gonna have to end there, because otherwise we'll be hearing Kieran's 20 questions to parliamentarians story for a while. So thank you for your input, Kieran. It's super valuable, and apologies for getting you to hold your wish, but you know how we are together sometimes. That's what I just say. Right, there's loads of questions that haven't been answered in the Q&A. So what I'm going to suggest we do, I will take a copy of those and I'll put those into the closing email, and closing email or the follow-up email. So for anybody who has asked a question that we can answer in terms of like what's the link, or if there's links to information, we'll do our best to do that through the follow-up email. This recording will be available on YouTube. The next webinar we'll be doing will be all about well-being and mental well-being. I think it's really, really important, and some of the things we've touched on today have got me thinking about that already, so thank you for the contributions to that. If you want to know more about what the Scottish Transitions Forum does, you can come along to our event on the 5th of October. There will be more in your follow-up email about that too. And I think that's everything.
Well, that's Scott. I also made bots on Discord, so every time a YouTube channel uploads a video, I always know because I can watch on Discord. So I'll know once it's uploaded because I made a Discord channel up.
You need to teach me how to do that, Kieran, because then it was kind of like a Google alert. It sounds amazing. But I just want to say,
ask me and I'll teach you anytime.
All right, I'll speak to you about it this afternoon. But thank you so much, Kieran, for your input today. It's been really, really good. And I just want to say thank you very much to Lee, who's no longer here, Sylvia, Leanne, and Tracy. So I hope we're all recovering well from yesterday. You all have a good week, and look forward to seeing you at a future webinar soon, I guess. Thanks so much.
Yeah, my future webinar is used at 3:30.
I know, you're a busy lad today, Kieran.
Yep.
Bye, everybody. Thank you for coming.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for having us.